Listen, that sound is the inside of a secret. It is the year 1307, and you are in the hold of a Templar ship. Not just any ship. This is part of the most powerful, most secretive naval fleet in all of Europe, the maritime arm of the Knights Templar. A fleet built over decades, fueled by unimaginable wealth, protected by papal decree, and crewed by men who answered to no king. They were bankers, warriors, archivists, and they knew something was coming. On October 13, 1307, a king's order sparks the Night of Terror, Friday the 13th. The term is born here, in betrayal. Every Templar in France is to be arrested, their assets seized, their history burned. But on the coast, at the port of La Rochelle, the king's men find a puzzle that will outlive his empire. The ships are gone. Not just one or two, the entire fleet, hundreds of vessels, vanished. No battle, no storm, no wreckage, no logs. It is as if the sea itself opened up and swallowed them whole. Where did they go? Did they sink? Did they scatter? Or did they sail into a secret the world wasn't ready for? This isn't a story about what was lost. It's about what they took with them, and why they chose to disappear forever. The air is cold and tastes of salt and wet stone. A thick, damp mist coils through the rigging of the ships moored in the harbor, muffling the world. This is not a merchant's dock. There is no raucous laughter from taverns, no shouted negotiations, no clatter of crates. The only sounds are the gentle lap of water against hulls, the creak of oak and hemp, and the low murmur of men who have no need to raise their voices. The ships are carracks and cogs, high-sided, a deep-keeled, built for war and for weather. They are dark shapes against the faint moon glow, their sails tightly furled. But on the largest, anchored at the mouth of the harbor, a single banner hangs limp from the mainmast. As a gust of wind briefly parts the fog, it unfurls a blood-red cross patee on a field of stark white, the sigil of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The Knights Templar. On the quay side, a single figure stands, hood drawn against the chill. This is you. Your boots are damp on the weathered planks. You are not here as a participant, but as a witness, a ghost in the machine of history. Behind you, the city of La Rochelle sleeps, or pretends to. Torches flicker behind the arrow slits of the Templar Tower, but its great gate is shut. Ahead, the Atlantic breathes a vast, black emptiness. You feel it first as a pressure, not in the air, but in the silence. This is the edge of the known world, and anchored here, in the heart of the most loyal Templar port in France, is the reason a king cannot sleep. The figure's gaze sweeps across the harbor. Dozens of ships, maybe hundreds. It's impossible to count in the dark. This isn't a navy. It's a floating fortress, a bank vault, an archive. For decades, it has been the unspoken strength of the order. Their trade routes snake from Cyprus to Cornwall, their wealth flowing back here, to this spot. But tonight, the fleet isn't receiving. It's preparing to leave. A low whistle echoes from the largest ship. On the deck, lanterns are shuttered, their light reduced to thin slits. Shadowy figures move with a purpose that is both urgent and utterly silent. They are not loading cargo. They are securing it. They've been preparing for weeks. Royal agents in Paris noted the unusual purchases, vast quantities of hardtack, salted meat, water casks, parchment, ink. Not for a siege, but for a voyage. The king's spies thought it was for reinforcement in the east. They were wrong. A small rowboat emerges from the mist, cutting a silent V through the still water. It bumps against the hull of the great ship. Figures exchange quiet words. Something heavy and wrapped in oilcloth is handed up. The rest are set for dawn. The orders are signed. The warrant sealed. King Philip IV needs their wealth, but more than that, he needs their silence. The Templars know too much about the crowns they bankroll, the secrets they keep. But someone warned them. The figure on the dock turns, looking back toward the inland road. The faint, distant sound of horses, a dozen, 100. The rhythm is too steady, too disciplined to be. Merchants, the warning didn't come from the Pope, Clement V, though he hesitated and prevaricated. It didn't come from the king's own minister, Guillaume de Nogaret, though his web of spies is vast. The whisper that traveled west to La Rochelle came from a shadow within a shadow. And it didn't say if, it said when. On the ship, the last of the crates is stowed. A man, face obscured by a hood, raises a hand. It is not a wave. It is a signal. One by one, throughout the harbor, dark sails begin to drop from the yards. They do not flap in the wind. They hang, heavy and silent. The fleet isn't waiting for dawn. It's leaving tonight, under a moon that is both witness and accomplice. The figure on the dock takes a step back, melting into the deeper shadow of a warehouse. The show is not for you. The deck is a model of controlled chaos. Men speak in gestures, not words. The only sounds are the tension in the ropes and the quiet, firm commands of the ship's commander, a man they call the preceptor. The tide turns. We go with it. The manifests are sealed. The brethren are accounted for, all but the land party from Poitiers. They will not make it. The preceptor's face is grim in the shuttered lantern light. He is not an old man, but his eyes carry the weight of empires. They knew the price. We all do. Cast off. The order is relayed not by a shout, but by a series of hand signals that pass from ship to ship like a ripple. Mooring lines are slipped. The creak of timber changes pitch as the ships begin to feel the pull of the current. A young sergeant brother approaches, clutching a seal tube. The chart room is clear. Preceptor. The special cargo is secure below the waterline. The Master of Scrolls asks if the destination is still to be held to the one bearing. The preceptor takes the tube. He doesn't open it. The course is set. Tell him to pray for fog. The sergeant nods and retreats. The preceptor walks to the stern, looking back at the receding lights of La Rochelle. He doesn't look like a man fleeing. He looks like a man executing a plan decades. This is not a retreat. It is a strategic withdrawal on a scale history has never seen. They aren't running from a fight. They are preserving a legacy. The king wants their gold, their land. He has no idea what they are really taking with them. The mist thickens, swallowing the last view of the shore. The world shrinks to the deck of the ship. The sound of water and the unknown ahead. The first sliver of sun cuts across the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood and gold. The mist begins to burn away. The figure is still there, a silent spectator. The sound of the horses is loud now. A thunderous approach. Torches flare at the end of the street. Royal soldiers, led by a bailiff in the king's colors, pour onto the docks. They are armed for a fight, expecting resistance. They find nothing. The bailiff pulls his horse to a rearing halt, his face a mask of confusion that quickly curdles into fury. His men fan out, kicking in warehouse doors, their shouts echoing in the sudden, immense silence. Where are they? By God, where are they? He dismounts, storming to the edge of the quay, staring out at the water. His lieutenant joins him. Pale, sir, the harbor, the bailiff sees it. The expanse of the harbor is utterly, terrifyingly empty. Not a single ship. The mooring posts stand like lonely sentinels. A few seagulls wheel overhead. Their cries the only mockery. This is not possible. Hundreds of ships. They can't just... He turns, his eyes wild, scanning the docks for anyone to blame. They land on the figure, standing calmly in the shadows. The bailiff draws his sword, striding over. You, what did you see? Speak. The figure says nothing. The bailiff gets closer, the point of his sword glinting in the dawn light. He sees no fear, only a deep, unsettling knowing. Were you with them, a Templar spy? The figure slowly raises a hand, not in threat, but in a gesture toward the sea. The bailiff follows the gaze. There, on the horizon, the last tendril of mist dissolves, and for one fleeting second, it seems to outline the ghost of a sail, a stark black shape against the dying night, and then it is gone. The bailiff lowers his sword, his bravado evaporating, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He isn't just facing a logistical failure. He is facing a mystery that will haunt his king, and history for centuries. The king's men would search the city, interrogate fishermen, scour the coast. For leagues, they would find nothing. No wreckage, no reports of a great naval battle, not a single splintered piece of timber washing ashore with a red cross upon it. The soldiers mill about, lost and confused. The bailiff stands rooted to the spot, staring at the empty sea. The fleet didn't sink. It didn't return to port. It didn't leave a note. It was there, and then it wasn't. The pride of the Templar Navy, their treasury, their secrets, gone, swallowed by the Atlantic fog as completely as if they had sailed off the edge of the world. The camera pulls back, rising above the docks, above the confused soldiers, above the city. The rest would proceed. There would be trials, confessions under torture, burnings. History would record the destruction of the Knights Templar on land. But the question of the sea, the mystery of the missing fleet, that would be quietly buried. Too embarrassing for a king, too inexplicable for the chroniclers. We see a final, sweeping aerial view of the completely vacant harbor of La Rochelle. But you were there. You heard the silence. You felt the purpose in their movements. You know, they didn't vanish. They departed. The question is, where? And what were they so determined to protect that they chose to erase themselves from history itself? 1 week later, the air in the chamber is thick with wood smoke, expensive wax, and a far more potent scent, pure, undiluted fury. King Philip IV of France, the Fair, is anything but. His famously handsome face is a tight, pale mask. He does not pace. He is utterly still, a predator frozen mid-strike. Before him, the bailiff from La Rochelle kneels, still in his travel-stained clothes, head bowed. He trembles. Between them, on an ornate marble table, sits a single object, a heavy iron key. It is beautifully wrought, its bow shaped like the Templar cross. It is the symbolic key to the treasury at the Paris Temple. Guillaume de Nogaret, the king's gaunt and ruthless keeper of the seals, stands in the shadows, his fingers steepled. His presence is like a chill in the room. Say it again. The harbor was empty, Your Grace. Completely. We secured the preceptory, the stables, the living quarters. We arrested every soul. We found a few scribes, some stable boys, a handful of knights too old or too ill to travel. But the port, the ships, the reason for this entire, delicate operation, the assets that were to replenish our empty coffers, the floating treasury. You are telling me that an entire fleet, the size of which would challenge our own navy, simply evaporated. There was no sign of struggle, Your Majesty, no reports from coastal watchtowers. It is as if they were never there. The men you arrested, what did they say? Nothing, my lord. They claim to know nothing. They speak of quiet activity in the days prior, of prayers, of preparing for a coming storm. But of the fleet's destination, they are either ignorant or what? Or they are terrified of something, far more than us. The king's hand slams down on the table. The key jumps. The bailiff flinches. Terrified of me, I am their king. I am God's anointed. Their order is dissolved by my order and soon by papal decree. What other power holds sway? He picks up the key, his knuckles white around it. He is not just angry. He is unnerved. This was not in the plan. The plan was clean, clinical, arrest, confiscate, try, dissolve. The wealth of the Templars was to flow into the royal treasury, canceling the crown's massive debts to them. The fleet was the crown jewel. This key is a joke. It opens a door to an empty room. We seized their strong boxes in Paris, filled with ledgers, deeds, promises of payment. But the actual coin, the bullion, the relics that could ransom emperors, gone. It was never here. It was always there. On those ships, the fleet was their true vault. Your Grace, mobile, untraceable, beyond the reach of any earthly authority. It appears they exercised their final option. King Philip turns his icy gaze back to the bailiff. Get out. The bailiff scrambles to his feet, bowing profusely, and practically flees the chamber. When the door thuds shut, the king rounds on Nogaret. Who warned them? Guillaume. It was you who designed this. A simultaneous strike across the entire kingdom. Secrecy was paramount. The secrecy was intact. The orders were delivered by trusted men. But sire, we are not dealing with common thieves. The Templars were a network. They have eyes in every port, ears in every court. They did not need a specific warning. They felt the change in the wind. They saw the king gathering his storm clouds, and they battened down their hatches. Do not poetize. Their treason. They have stolen from the crown of France. Have they? Or have they merely moved their own property beyond the reach of a confiscation they saw as unjust? The legalities are complex. The king's eyes blaze. The legalities are not complex to a man who is bankrupt. I want them found. I want every shipmaster from Calais to Marseille questioned. I want every coastal lord and bishop to provide reports. I want to know if so much as a Templar rowboat has been sighted. Offer rewards. Threaten penalties. I want my gold, Guillaume. And if they are not found, the Atlantic is vast. The world is larger than our maps. They could be. He gestures vaguely westward. They are not phantoms. They are men in wooden ships laden with the kingdom's ransom. They must have gone somewhere. But that was the heart of the king's rage and his fear. They were men in wooden ships. And men in wooden ships leave traces. Wake. Garbage. Sightings. Requests for water. But the Templar fleet left nothing. It was a clean cut. A surgical disappearance. And for a king who believed he controlled everything, this void of information was a personal affront. It was also a financial catastrophe. The chamber is cavernous, cold, stone walls, a vaulted ceiling. It should be overflowing with chests of gold and silver, stacks of coin, jewels on velvet cushions. It is not. A few chests lie open, their contents spilling out, meticulously rolled parchments, ledgers bound in leather, sealed letters. The air smells of dust and ink, not wealth. Nogaret walks slowly through the room, a scribe trailing him with a tablet. The king watches from the doorway, his expression dark. Inventory, 137 ledgers of account. These to properties in Aquitaine, Burgundy, Champagne, letters of credit from the Doge of Venice, promissory notes from the English crown, and the specie, my lord. The bullion, there is none. He kicks a small, forlorn chest. It scrapes across the flagstones, empty. They banked the wealth of Europe, but they did not keep it in one place. That was their genius and their arrogance. The money was always moving, from pilgrim to commandery, from commandery to ship, from ship to another port. It was a river, and we have dammed it only to find the riverbed dry. King Philip steps into the room. He picks up a ledger, its pages filled with precise, cramped script. He cannot decipher the abbreviations, the coded entries. What are their secrets? You accuse them of heresy, of idolatry. Where is the proof? Where is this? Baphomet. We have their confessions. We have words beaten out of broken old men. I need evidence. A head, an idol, a blasphemous text. Something to show the Pope, to show the people, to justify this. Without it, we are not purging heretics. We are robbing the most powerful bank in Christendom, and we look like common bandits. His voice echoes in the empty vault. The silence that follows is deafening. Perhaps the proof was also mobile. Your grace, perhaps the most damning evidence of their sin and the most valuable artifacts of their power, were not in their fortresses, but in their holds. The king drops the ledger. It lands with a thud, sending up a cloud of dust. The truth of it settles over him. He had planned to seize a static treasure, but the Templar treasure was never static. It was dynamic. It was alive, and it had escaped. The king's men would spend the next months, then years, searching. They would comb through every commandery, interrogate every captive Templar, bribe every sailor from the Mediterranean to the North Sea, and they would find nothing. No maps of the fleet's route, no whispers of its destination. The silence was absolute. It was as if the order had collectively decided to forget, to swallow the greatest maritime secret in history whole. The official inquest would slowly, quietly, stop asking about the ships. It was an embarrassment, a dead end. The mystery of the missing fleet was filed away, not as an open case, but as an official failure. November 1, 1307, 3 weeks after the disappearance. A storm is raging. Wind whips rain horizontally. The sea below is a chaos of white foam and black water. The figure from the docks of La Rochelle stands here now, cloak pulled tight against the gale. The search is over for the king. It is just beginning for you. You look out at the furious Atlantic. This is not a sea that gives up its secrets easily, but absences can be as telling as presences. The king saw only what was missing: the gold, the ships. He failed to ask the right question. It wasn't what was missing. It was why. You turn your back to the sea, facing inland. The wind screams. Why would a fleet that size risk the autumn Atlantic, the most dangerous season for sailing? Why not scatter to friendly ports in Scotland or Portugal? Why not make a stand? The risk of annihilation at sea was immense, unless the alternative, falling into the king's hands, was deemed worse. A tremendous wave crashes against the cliffs below. The sound of booming cannonade fell through the feet. What was on those ships that was so valuable, so incriminating, or so sacred, that its capture was unthinkable, that its loss to the depths was a preferable fate? The king thought he was hunting treasure. But treasure can be spent. What if they were protecting something that could not be valued, something that could not be allowed to fall into the hands of a bankrupt king or a compromised church? The storm begins to abate as quickly as it began. The rain lessens. Between the breaking clouds, a single star is visible. The trail does not end at the empty harbor of La Rochelle. It begins there. It begins with this question, and to find the answer, we cannot look where the king looked. We must look where he refused to. Not in the empty vaults of Paris, but in the whispers he tried to silence, in the records he tried to burn, and in the vast, silent cartography of the sea itself. The fleet had a destination, and to find it, we must first understand what it was truly carrying. 7 years before the fall, the air is still and dry, smelling of vellum, iron galling, and beeswax. The only sound is the delicate scratch of a quill, a scribe brother, his face illuminated. by a single candle, works with intense concentration. He is not copying a Bible or a prayer book. Before him is a complex diagram, an astrolabe, its parts disassembled and labeled in precise Arabic script. In the margins, he has notes in Latin. To understand what the Templars took with them, you must first understand what they were. We see the knights, the warriors, the bankers. We rarely see the scholars. The scribe finishes his work and carefully rolls the vellum. He carries it not to a library shelf, but to a heavy iron-banded chest in the corner of the room. He unlocks it with a key from a chain around his neck. Inside the chest are dozens of similar scrolls. He places the new one inside, and for a moment, the light catches the other titles. They are not what you would expect. While Europe slept through the Dark Ages, the Templars, during their time in the Holy Land, were awake. They were conduits. They sat at the crossroads of the world, between East and West, and they listened. They learned. They brought back more than relics. They brought back knowledge. Mathematics from Arabic scholars that wouldn't reach European universities for a century. Astronomy, navigation, cartography, architecture. This was their true treasure, not gold, but understanding. And to a church that demanded faith without question, understanding was a dangerous commodity. The scribe locks the chest. His expression is not one of pride, but of guardianship and concern. October 12th, 1307. Back on the fleeing flagship, the preceptor stands with the master of scrolls, an elderly, frail-looking brother whose eyes, however, are sharp and alive with intelligence. The preceptor holds the sealed tube given to him earlier. Is it all accounted for? Every codex, every chart, every translation from the House of Wisdom, the original writings of Al-Idrisi, the star charts from Alexandria, the cargo from the Damascus expedition. It is all below dot secure. And the other, the special custody, the sanctum, is sealed. The keys are distributed as protocol demands. The bearers do not know each other. The location is known only to you and to the charts that are elsewhere. The preceptor nods, his jaw tight. This is more than a logistics operation. It is a sacred trust. The king seeks to line his pockets with our coin. He has no idea what he truly threatens. He would use it for power, or destroy it out of fear. Then our course is the only one. Preserve the light, even if it means hiding it from the world. The preceptor looks up at the mast, where the Red Cross banner now flies upside down, a universal sign of distress, but here, a silent signal of a deeper calamity. This was the cargo of unspoken value. This was what could not be allowed to fall into Philip's hands, not because of its price, but because of its power. The Templars weren't just moving money. They were moving a library. They were moving the forbidden fruits of 100 cultures, the kind of knowledge that could reshape empires, challenge dogma, and redraw the map of the world. They were saving the Renaissance before it could even begin. November 1307, a stark contrast to the Templar scriptorium. This room is cold, damp, and smells of fear and burning peat. A single Templar knight, bruised and broken, sits chained to a chair. He is Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Order. Before him stands the Inquisitor, a man with the weary eyes of a bureaucrat doing a dirty job. We are not interested in your gold, Jacques. That is a matter for the king's tax collectors. We are interested in your soul, and the souls of your brothers. Confess to the idolatry. Admit to the spitting on the cross. Describe this. Baphomet you worship, and this can end. Jacques de Molay looks up, his eyes hollow but defiant. I have confessed to the sins you beat into me. What more do you want? I know nothing of idols. We have reports from Acre, from Cyprus, strange rites under the full moon, agreements with Saracen mystics. You possess things, artifacts, not Christian. Where are they? Jacques de Molay manages a weak, bloody smile. You are looking in the wrong place. You sift through dust and stone. You will find only dust and stone. The ships, Jacques. What was on the ships? De Molay's smile widens, a ghost of the powerful man he once was. The things you fear are not in your dungeon, Inquisitor. They are safe. Somewhere the wind blows cleaner than it does in this room. The Inquisitor backhands him across the face. The blow is less about punishment and more about frustration. He is not getting the answers he wants, or perhaps he is getting the exact answer he feared. The Inquisitors tortured for confessions of heresy, but they were haunted by whispers of something else, something tangible, ahead, bearded and ancient, said to be the source of the Order's wisdom and power. Forbidden gospels, maps to a paradise older than Eden. Whether these things were real or myth, the Templars fostered the legend, and in doing so, They created the perfect smokescreen. The king and the church were so busy hunting for a demonic idol, they never saw the true prize, a library of human achievement. The coast of Brittany, present day. The figure stands at the mouth of a sea cave, the same one from the end of chapter 2. The storm has passed, leaving the air sharp and clean. You hold a modern tablet, displaying a scan of a medieval port ledger from La Rochelle. On the screen, one entry is highlighted. It is a list of provisions loaded onto a ship called the Esperanza 3 days before the disappearance. The official manifests, what few survive the king's purge, tell a boring story. Grain, wine, rope, weaponry, supplies for a long journey. What is the unofficial records, the ones that were never meant to be kept, that whisper the truth? You zoom in on the entry. Listed between 20 barrels of salt pork and 100 fathoms of new rope is a single, cryptic line. Item: 1 crate, marked with the serpent and the star for the master's eyes only. Value: uncertain. Value: uncertain. This phrase appears again and again in the peripheral documents, not in the royal inventories, but in the private notes of dockmasters, the diaries of supply clerks. A crate of uncertain value loaded in Marseille, a chest of uncertain value received in Cyprus, scrolls of uncertain value transferred from a commandery in London to a ship in La Rochelle. You look up from the tablet into the dark mouth of the cave. It was a code, a way of labeling something whose true worth wasn't monetary and whose nature couldn't be committed to paper. This was the real cargo, the knowledge, the relics, the things that define the order's purpose beyond God and gold. You step into the cave. It is colder inside. The sound of the waves is muffled. Your flashlight beam cuts through the darkness, illuminating the walls. The king's men searched for chests of gold. They would never have found them because they were looking for the wrong thing. The greatest treasure of the Knights Templar wasn't something you could spend. It was something you had to understand. And that is why the fleet didn't run to a friendly port. It ran to a place where that understanding could be protected, where it could be hidden until the world was ready for it, or until it was forgotten entirely. The beam of your light stops. Carved into the wall of the cave, worn smooth by centuries of tides, but still unmistakable, is a symbol. It is not a cross. It is a compass rose, and at its center, a small, precise serpent coiled around a single star. You reach out and touch the carving. It is cold and smooth. It is not a random mark. It is a signature. The trail is not gone. It was just written in a language the king couldn't read. To find the missing fleet, we must stop looking for sunken ships laden with gold. We must start looking for this, for the signs they left behind, for the cargo of unspoken value. The carving is cold beneath your fingertips. It is not a graffito, not the idle scratch of a shepherd seeking shelter. The lines are too deep, too deliberate. The serpent's coils are even and precise. The points of the star are sharp, uneroded by the salt wind that has scoured the cave's entrance for centuries. This is a waypoint, a marker. The king's men saw an empty harbor and assumed a void. But nature abhors a vacuum, and history abhors a silence. The Templars did not simply vanish into the Atlantic maw. They left a trail. But it is not a trail of breadcrumbs, easily followed and easily consumed. It is a trail of whispers, of symbols, of absences that scream louder than any royal proclamation. You step back, your light tracing the symbol once more, the serpent and the star. It is not a common Templar motif. It is something rarer, something more specific, a sigil for those in the know. To understand where they were going, we must first abandon the notion of a single destination. A fleet that large, that conspicuous, does not simply sail to a friendly port and drop anchor. The risk of betrayal, of a king's wrath falling upon their hosts, was too great. The only logical conclusion is that they never intended to arrive anywhere as a fleet. Their strategy was dispersion, a great dissolving. The beam of your flashlight moves past the symbol, deeper into the cave. The floor is sandy, littered with smooth, dark stones. But one stone is different. It is lighter in color, and it is not a stone at all. It is a piece of worked masonry, roughly triangular, its edges worn smooth by time and tide. You kneel, brushing away the sand. The plan would have been one of breathtaking audacity and discipline. A prearranged point, likely far out to sea, beyond the sight of any land-based observer. There, the fleet would have divided. Smaller, faster squadrons, each with a different bearing, a different mission, a different piece of the whole. Carved into the face of the masonry is a series of lines. It's a crude but unmistakable compass rose, and beside it, 3 letters carved in the same precise hand as the serpent and star, Ori. But they didn't sail east. East was the heart of Christendom, the heart of the danger. This was not a direction. It was a designation. One group, perhaps, the one carrying the most volatile cargo, the most dangerous knowledge, would have taken the most perilous route, not toward sanctuary, but toward oblivion, west, into the utter unknown of the Atlantic, a one-way voyage to ensure that what they carried could never be used for the wrong purposes. You rise, turning back to the cave entrance. The symbol on the wall is now silhouetted against the slate-gray sky and the churning sea beyond. But others had safer harbors in mind, places where the long arm of the French king and the compromised pope could not easily reach, places with their own reasons for harboring Europe's most wanted men. The clues point to primary sanctuaries, to legends born from the same night of silence. The wind here is different. It carries the scent of peat and pine, not salt. The coast is rugged, a tapestry of deep glens and hidden inlets. This is a land of stubborn independence, of clans who answered to no king but their own. The first whisper leads north to Scotland. In 1307, Scotland was a nation at war with England, and by extension, at odds with the papacy that had excommunicated its king, Robert the Bruce. It was the perfect refuge, hostile to Philip's allies and indifferent to papal decrees. The image of a single-masted cog appears, its sails patched and salt-stained, slipping into a sea lock under the cover of a squall. There are no banners. The men on deck are not dressed as knights, but in the rough wool and leather of fishermen. The legends here are woven into the very stone. At Rochelle Chapel, built centuries later, the stonework is a library of strange symbolism American plants carved decades before Columbus, patterns that echo Templar graves in Jerusalem. The Saint Docielairs, the lords of Rochelle, were deeply tied to the order. The story is told of hooded men arriving from the sea, of stone chests buried in the foundations of castles, of a sudden and unexplained sophistication in Scottish military tactics that led to victory at Bannockburn. But it is a quiet legend, a secret kept for generations, hinted at in family histories and odd, anomalous carving. The Scottish refuge is one of integration. The Templars didn't hide here. They changed their clothes and their names, and they faded into the fabric of a new nation. Imagine, the sun is brighter here. The air is warm, scented with citrus and dust. Before you stands the convent of Christ, a sprawling fortress monastery that was once the heart of the Templar presence in Portugal. The second and perhaps more compelling whisper leads south, to Portugal. Here, the trail moves from legend into the stark light of historical record. King Denis of Portugal refused to persecute the Templars. He saw their value, their maritime skill, their wealth. In 1319, after the order's dissolution, he simply recycled them. The image shifts. The same tired cog from the Scottish coast now sails into the Tagus River. But here, there is no secrecy. The ship flies a new banner, a simplified red cross on a white field. The Order of Christ. The men on deck wear new robes, but the faces are the same. The knowledge they carry is the same. He created a new order, the Order of Christ, and gifted it all the former Templar properties, assets, and most importantly their ships and their sailors. It was the most audacious sleight of hand in history. The Templars didn't disappear in Portugal. They were given a royal pardon and a new uniform. And under this new banner, they would do exactly what they had always done, sail. The camera focuses on the famous window of the Tamar chapter house, a sprawling, intricate stone compass rose that seems to chart a course not for Jerusalem, but for the open ocean. They would perfect the caravel, the ship that would make the age of exploration possible. They would fund and guide Prince Henry the Navigator. Their ship, still bearing the same red cross, now slightly modified, would be the first to round the coast of Africa, to map the Atlantic islands, and some would argue to reach the shores of the New World long before Columbus. In Portugal, the fleet didn't vanish. It became the foundation of an empire. Randy, present day, you are back in the cave. The sound of the waves, a constant reminder of the scale of the mystery. The piece of masonry is in your hand, Ori east. But it wasn't east. It was a label. The Orient Squadron, the one tasked with the overland journey, the secure networks, the allies in the east. So we are left with three possibilities, three branches of the same escape tree. Scotland, where they vanished into myth and bloodline. Portugal, where they transformed into the architects of discovery. And the third path, the westward path, the one for which there are no records, only rumors. The path of the true believers, the guardians of the most forbidden cargo. Who chose eternal exile over the compromise of rebirth? You place the stone back on the sandy floor. The symbol on the wall seems to glow in the dying light of the afternoon. The compass points in all directions because the fleet scattered to all directions. Their greatest strength was not their swords or their sails, but their secrecy. By dividing, they ensured that no single capture, no single betrayal could end their mission. The king could not chase 100 ghosts. The mystery of the missing fleet is not one mystery. It is 100, and to solve it, we must be willing to follow 100 different trails to 100 different ends. You turn your back on the carving and walk out of the cave toward the modern world. But the symbol is burned into your mind. The serpent, the star, the endless, whispering sea. The cloak of silence they wove was perfect, but even the tightest weave has tiny gaps, tiny holes that let the light through. We have found one hole in a cave in Brittany. To find the others, we must stop looking for a fleet and start looking for an idea. The dust, in the end, was the only thing that settled. In the weeks and months that followed the autumn of 1307, it settled over the empty docks of La Rochelle. It settled on the unused desks of Templar scribes in Paris. It settled into the silent courtyards of commanderies from Normandy to Provence, where the king's new stewards now tallied assets that felt hollow, meaningless, without the men and the purpose that had animated them. The great machine of the Templar order had not been dismantled. It had been unplugged, and the silence it left behind was deafening. The king had won. On paper, the order of the temple was broken, its members arrested, its name dragged through the mud of heresy and perversion. But the victory was a phantom. The king's coffers remained empty. His war chest was not replenished. He had seized the body of the beast, but its lifeblood, its treasure, and its secrets had flowed away into the night sea. The aftermath was not one of triumph, but of a deepening, gnawing frustration. In the royal chambers, the mood turned from fury to a sullen, simmering resentment. The missing fleet was no longer a topic for open discussion. It was an official failure, a blot on the record. And King Philip IV was a man who prized his image above all else. Inquiries were quietly closed. Agents were reassigned. The narrative was carefully shifted onto the safer, more salacious ground of the trials. The confessions extracted in dark rooms, the specter of Baphomet. It was easier to prosecute sin than to explain a void. The church, too, found itself in an uncomfortable position. Pope Clement V, who had reluctantly acquiesced to the king's demands, now presided over the dissolution of an order that had once been the church's most powerful fist, and the most tangible fruits of that dissolution. The vast wealth that was to be transferred to the Hospitallers were nowhere to be found. The papal bulls spoke of transfer of property, of assets, of spiritual responsibilities, but they could not transfer what did not physically exist. The Vatican's ledgers showed a colossal credit that would never be cashed. Across Europe, a strange economic paralysis set in. The Templars had not just been bankers, they had been the circulatory system of medieval finance. Letters of credit went unpaid, debts were frozen, trade routes that had been secured by Templar guarantees grew unstable. The sudden removal of the order was like pulling a keystone from an arch. The entire structure shuddered. Merchants, who had once relied on the Templars' flawless logistics, now found their goods stranded, their shipments insecure. The silence of the fleet created a ripple of silence across the continent's commerce. But it was in the realm of knowledge that the loss was most profound. Though least immediately understood, the Templar network had been a conduit for information. Their ships carried more than silk and spice. They carried ideas, news, innovations in navigation and medicine from the Arab world, architectural techniques from the East. With the fleet gone, that conduit was severed. Europe's connection to the wider world narrowed. The light of inquiry that the Templars had helped keep flickering was snuffed out, and the continent slipped a little deeper into its insularity. And what of the men? The few Templars left behind. In their rest, the old, the sick, the strategically abandoned faced the king's justice. Their testimonies are study in evasion. They confess to the absurdities tortured into them, spitting on the cross, denying Christ, worshiping a cat. But on the subject of the fleet, their knowledge was suddenly, uniformly, and conveniently poor. They were simple soldiers. They did not know the ways of the sea. They had heard rumors, but nothing more. It was a coordinated, silent defense. They protected the secret with their lives, which many of them forfeit. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, from his cell, understood the true victory. They had taken his freedom, his order, and would soon take his life. But they had not taken the future. As he was led to the stake in 1314, he might have looked not toward the king or the jeering crowd, but westward and taken a small cold comfort in the knowledge that the king's prize had sailed beyond his grasp forever. The last word belonged not to the executioner, but to the sea. Yet, nature and humanity alike abhor a vacuum. Into the silence left by the Templars, others rushed. In Portugal, as we have seen, the Order of Christ rose from the ashes, a phoenix with the same feathers. In Scotland, the legacy was absorbed into the bloodlines and loyalties of powerful families. But elsewhere, the void bred speculation, then legend, then obsession, without facts. Fantasy rushed in. The missing fleet became a ghost story. Sailors' taverns from Genoa to Dublin buzzed with tales of phantom ships, with Red Cross sails sighted in unlikely places off the coast of Africa. In the fogs of Newfoundland, gliding silently through the Straits of Gibraltar, the fleet was cursed, blessed, immortal. It was a floating Atlantis. The lack of evidence became, paradoxically, proof of its supernatural existence. The treasure, too, grew in the telling. It was no longer just gold and silver. It was the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the mummified head of John the Baptist, the original teachings of Christ. The king's failure to find it only proved its incredible, world-altering power. The Templars, in their disappearance, achieved a form of immortality. They became larger in death than they had ever been in life. They became a myth. And so the world moved on. But it was a world diminished, a little poorer, a little more ignorant, a little more suspicious. The great what if of the Templar fleet hung over the 14th century. What if that knowledge had not been lost? What if those ships had reached a safe port and preserved their cargo? How might the Renaissance have dawned differently? How might the map of the world have been unfolded earlier? The silence after the storm is often more telling than the storm itself. The aftermath of the Templar disappearance was not an event, but a condition of chronic, low-grade fever of curiosity and loss that would infect historians, treasure hunters, and dreamers for 7 centuries. The king had sought to erase them. Instead, he made them eternal. He did not create a solved mystery. He created a ghost, and ghosts are infinitely harder to kill. The sea holds its secrets close, but the land remembers. It remembers in the tilt of a standing stone, in the alignment of a chapel window, in the worn-down path to a forgotten cove. To find a trail the king's men could not see, you must stop listening for the crash of waves and start reading the silence of the stone. You are no longer on the coast of France. The search has pulled you inland, into the hushed sanctuaries of Portugal, to the convent of Christ in Tamar. The air here is still and warm, thick with the scent of old incense and older stone. You stand before the Carilla, the original Templar oratory, a 16-sided marvel based on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. It is a stone ship, forever moored in this Portuguese hillside. Your gaze is not on the altar, but on the floor. Worn into the stone flags by 7 centuries of devoted feet is a path, a circular procession. But your eye catches something else. A single, specific flagstone near the rear of the Carilla is different. Its edges are sharper, less worn. Kneeling, you run your fingers along a hairline crack that outlines a perfect rectangle. A trapdoor, long since sealed. The official history says the Templars simply became the Order of Christ. They changed their robes and kept their lands. But the unofficial history, the one written in architecture and hidden geometry, suggests something else. They didn't just change, they buried. They took the most sensitive core of their knowledge and they entered it within the very structures they were allowed to keep. The image shifts. You are in Scotland now, in the Rochelle chapel. The outside is a testament to late Gothic flourish. But inside, it is a jungle of stone. Every surface is carved flowers, vines, angels, and patterns. The famed apprentice pillar is wrapped in stone vines that spiral with a precision that feels mathematical, not artistic. High on a ceiling boss, hidden in a shadowy corner, is a carving that does not belong, a maize plant, a crop unknown in 15th century Europe. These are not mere decorations. They are frozen knowledge, a library in stone, the plants of the New World. Carved decades before Columbus set sail, star charts disguised as floral patterns. Architectural secrets encoded in the curves of an arch. The fleet may have vanished, but its cargo was unloaded, cataloged, and hidden in plain sight, waiting for a time when the world might be ready to read it. But how did they know where to sail? The answer lies not in a chest of gold, but in a drawer of dust-covered vellum. You are in the archive of a monastery in Sicily, a place with historic ties to both the Templars and the Arab scholars of the Mediterranean. The archivist, an old monk with ink-stained fingers, lays a protective sheet of glass over a document. It is a porcelain chart, a medieval sea map. But it is all wrong. The coastlines of Europe are cruelly drawn, almost an afterthought. The focus, the detail, The obsessive precision is lavished on the vast emptiness of the Atlantic Ocean, and in that emptiness are islands. Antillia, Satanazes. Brassel, mythical places on most maps. But on this map, their coastlines are drawn with confidence, with specific bays, rivers, and safe anchorages, as if the cartographer had been there. The Templars did not sail blind. They possessed charts that were generations ahead of their time. While European maps showed sea monsters and the edge of the world, Templar maps, copied from Arab originals and augmented by their own clandestine voyages, showed something else, a pathway, a string of islands leading like stepping stones across the ocean. They weren't guessing. They were navigating. The most damning evidence, however, is not a map, but a lack of one. In the Vatican's own secret archives, there is a gap. A catalog entry from 1310, entered by a papal clerk, references a map of Mundi Navalis Templarium, naval world map of the Templars. The entry describes it as being of singular detail regarding the ocean as Occidentalis, the Western Ocean. The notation says it was confiscated from the Paris Temple and sent to Avignon for the Pope's eyes only. The next entry in the catalog is from 1312. It is a terse, two-line note, item aforementioned, lost in transit. Lost. It is the most convenient word in the history of inconvenient truths. Did a papal courier simply drop the most important map in the world into a river? Or was it lost by someone who understood its value, could not be allowed to fall into the hands of a pope who had just betrayed them? The map vanished from history as completely as the fleet that might have used it. The trail of the forgotten maps leads to dead ends and tantalizing clues. A sketch in the margin of a Templar prayer book found in a Welsh library shows a coastline that resembles Nova Scotia. A record from a shipwright in La Rochelle, dated 1306, mentions reinforcing the hull of a Templar carrack for extended voyage upon the ocean sea, a phrase never used for Mediterranean travel. The evidence is circumstantial, fragmentary, and maddening. A stone carving here, a line in a ledger there, a missing document in a vault. But when you lay all the fragments side by side, a picture begins to emerge. It is not a picture of a fleet lost in a storm. It is a picture of a fleet found. It is a picture of a destination. You are back in the present, standing on the shores of Oak Island, Nova Scotia. The modern-day treasure hunters with their drills and theories are looking for gold. But you are looking at the geometry of the island itself, the perfect triangle of its beaches, the artificial swamp that some believe was once a sheltered cove, the strange, meticulously laid stone pathways that lead nowhere. What if the legends are right, but for the wrong reason? What if the treasure buried here isn't gold, but a seed of knowledge planted far from the fires of the Inquisition, meant to be found when the world had changed? The money pit, with its booby-trapped flood tunnels, doesn't protect a pirate's loot. It protects a library. It is a time capsule. The final piece of the map is not on parchment, but in the stars. You look up at the night sky over the Azores, the last vestige of Europe before the ocean stretches uninterrupted to America. The constellations are brilliant here, undimmed by the lights of the continent. They didn't need GPS. They had the stars, and they had knowledge of currents and winds that wouldn't be officially discovered for another 200 years. The path across the Atlantic was not a mystery to them. It was a trade route they had chosen to keep to themselves. Until they needed an escape hatch, the maps of the forgotten were not lost. They were hidden, in stone, in stolen glances at Arab charts, in the very design of their ships. The fleet did not disappear because it was lost. It disappeared because it knew exactly where it was going, and it took with it the proof that the world was much, much larger than a king or a pope could ever imagine. The search does not end with a sunken hull raised from the depths, its hold spilling gold onto a modern deck. It does not end with a dusty chest, pried open and a camera's flash to reveal a chalice or a skull. Those are the endings of adventure stories. History is rarely so kind or so neat. The true legacy of the missing Templar fleet is not a thing you can hold in your hand. It is an echo, a ghost in the architecture of power, a whisper in the bloodlines of exploration, a question mark etched permanently onto the map of the world. You stand now at Sagres Point, Portugal, where the land shears off into the endless blue of the Atlantic. This is where Prince Henry the Navigator established his legendary navigation school, the launching point for the age of discovery. The wind here is a constant, roaring presence, whipping the flags atop the fortress. But whose ideas truly launched those first caravels into the unknown? The official story credits Prince Henry. But look at the ships that first rounded Cape Eudore, that first reached the Azores. They sailed under the banner of the Order of Christ. Their sails were emblazoned with a familiar, simplified Red Cross. The men who charted the winds and currents of the Atlantic were not new pioneers. They were the inheritors of a tradition. They were sailing with a map they didn't draw, following a star chart they didn't invent. The knowledge that had vanished from La Rochelle didn't die. It simply found new patrons. The image shifts to the interior of the Tamar chapter house. The great manuline window, a stone tapestry of ropes, corals, and nautical symbols, is not just a celebration of discovery. It is a confession. It is a monument to the fact that Portugal's golden age was built upon a foundation it never publicly acknowledged. The Templars didn't just bring their wealth, they brought their brains, and a nation wise enough to shelter them became the heir to their maritime empire. But one branch of the fleet, the most dedicated, the most secretive, likely never came back. Theirs was a one-way voyage. Their legacy is not in the maps they left behind, but in the mysteries they planted across the ocean. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, the Westford Knight in Massachusetts, the carvings in West Virginia that echo Celtic and Norse runes. These are the outliers, the anomalies that mainstream archaeology dismisses as hoaxes or misidentifications. But anomalies are the breadcrumbs of history. They are the things that don't fit the official narrative, and they cluster along the eastern seaboard of North America like driftwood from a single ancient wreck. You are looking at a photograph of the Narragansett Run of Stone, found in Rhode Island. Its runes are weathered, disputed, but one symbol is clear: a carved, square-rigged ship. It is a signature, a calling card left by men who wanted it known they had been there, but not who they were or why. These men were not colonists, they were preservers. Their mission was not to conquer or settle, but to hide, to take the most volatile, dangerous, or sacred parts of their cargo, the scrolls, the relics, the unorthodox knowledge, and bury it where no inquisitor would ever think to look, on a continent that, according to the maps of the time, did not exist. Their legacy is the whispered possibility that the history of the New World is older than we think, that the first Europeans to walk these shores were not Vikings or Spaniards, but monks and knights on a desperate mission of salvation. They left no cities, no empires. They left stones and stories. And what of the fleet itself, the great armada that slipped its moorings? The wood and canvas and rope, it returned to the elements. The ships were scuttled in deep, hidden fjords in Newfoundland, their timbers feeding the relentless forest. They were broken up for lumber in secret Scottish coves, their planks becoming the beams of pubs and farmhouses, their secrets built into the very homes of the people who sheltered them. They were repurposed, their distinctive hulls sanded down and rechristened with new names in Portuguese service. The physical fleet dissolved, its components scattering back into the world from which they came, leaving no tangible trace. But the idea of the fleet, the story of the fleet, proved indestructible. It became a catalyst. It fueled the dreams of explorers from Columbus to Cook, each hoping to stumble upon a lost treasure. It inspired secret societies, from the Freemasons to the Rosicrucians, each claiming a fragment of the Templars' esoteric wisdom. The absence of proof became the proof of something greater, a truth so powerful it had to be hidden. In the end, the most enduring legacy of the missing Templar fleet is the question itself, the refusal of history to provide a satisfying answer. The king wanted closure, a final accounting. He got a mystery that would outlive his dynasty, his nation, and his name. The Templars, in their failure to be caught, achieved a form of immortality. You are back where you began, on the quiet docks of La Rochelle. The modern marina is full of yachts, not warships. The water is calm, but the silence is still there, humming just beneath the surface of the everyday. We came looking for ships and found a symbol. We came looking for gold and found a question. The true treasure of the Templars was never in a chest. It was in their audacity, in their understanding that some truths are too valuable to be owned by empires, too fragile to be exposed to the light of their time. Their greatest act was not of conquest, but of conservation. They chose to become a mystery to save something from being erased. The camera pulls back, rising up over the harbor, over the city, until the entire coastline of France is visible, then the curve of the earth itself. They did not fail. They transformed. They dissolved into the landscape of Scotland, the bureaucracy of Portugal, the folklore of a new world. They became the wind in the sails of discovery, the chill down the spine of a king, the unanswerable question in a history book. They traded their existence for eternity, and in that, they won. The final shot is of the vast, empty Atlantic, stretching to the horizon. The sun sets, painting the water in hues of gold and blood. The sea keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its promises. The promise that there will always be another horizon, another mystery, another forgotten fleet sailing just beyond the edge of the known. The Templars are gone, but the silence they left behind is still speaking.